What is the scariest theory known to man? Story 1: The Dark Forest Theory. The reason why we don't see any evidence of alien life out there is that no one is keen to broadcast themselves with the risk of being detected by more hostile civilizations. This is particularly scary for me because we have been beaming out radio signals into space. Plus, we have a probe out there with a golden disc detailing what we look like and where we are. I loved that short horror story about receiving a message from outer space, having finally found someone to hear our radio messages broadcasted in space, and being decoded into, "Stop sending messages, they'll hear you." Story 2. It's theorized that some neutron stars, made of pure and extremely densely packed neutrons, can break down into even smaller elementary particles, quarks, and become strange stars, made of strange matter. If a strange star were to collide with another strange star, it could potentially eject bits of itself, strangelets, into space. If one of these strangelets were to hit Earth, it could theoretically infect regular matter and convert the entire planet into strange matter almost instantly, killing everything in the process. It's not confirmed that strange matter would behave this way, but it is certainly a possibility within known physics. Story 3. The idea of solipsism. Although that is more of a philosophical idea than a theory, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside one's own mind is unsure. The external world and other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside the mind. It's definitely scary to think that you could be the only self-aware thing in the universe. Everybody else you interact with might seem like they are, but you can't prove it. If that were true, you're all alone in this bizarre universe, and everything that you thought was real isn't. Story 4. The Fermi paradox considers the question of the likelihood of life evolving elsewhere in the universe. If it's not incredibly rare, and there's no obvious reason it should be, then we should be able to detect it. We can't. So where are they? One proposed answer is the Great Filter, which is a technology or an event that will be encountered by any intelligent civilization that becomes sufficiently advanced, and will have the unintended consequence of destroying that civilization. Think nuclear weapons, but with a 100% chance of annihilating all life on Earth. The reason we don't see any other life forms is that over and over again, they have evolved to the point where they inevitably discovered this technology and promptly destroyed themselves. And sooner or later, so will we. Story 5. Not so much a theory, but the idea that a large solar storm, if timed correctly, could knock out electrical systems across the planet. There have been some near misses, and the last time it happened was in the pre-electrical age when it nonetheless fried telegraph lines. But it is almost certainly just a matter of time before it happens again. A solar game of Russian roulette. If it helps, the people who look after the power grid are also terrified of this, so have designed systems to protect it. Most of the modern grid is protected against solar storms, and they can preemptively shut it off before the solar storm hits to minimize the damage. We have satellites monitoring the sun watching for solar storms. If a solar storm happens, we'll have something like a half-hour warning. It's not much, but it's enough to turn the important stuff off. The places that will be in trouble are the developing world that don't have the funds to upgrade their electrical grid. Story 6. The theory that if all is quiet in the woods, or anywhere outside, that you should very quickly leave because it means something is there that you do not want to encounter. I'm not very superstitious these days, nor do I believe in cryptids very much, but I grew up in the hills and hollers of Kentucky, and any time the birds stopped singing and the insects stopped chirping, I left. I have a very alert and aware pointer breed of dog, and damn if she gets up and starts pointing at something outside, I get uneasy. I do feel like animals have this innate ability to sense danger, whether it be natural or not, predators, catastrophic natural disasters, etc. It fascinates and terrifies me at the same time. Story 7. The idea that there is a reason that humans have developed the uncanny valley, or the fear or discomfort with someone that looks human but misses the mark on acting human. If beneficial traits are passed on because they ensure a higher rate of survival, what causes a trait of fear of non-human human-looking things? I believe our ancestors developed that fear because of dead bodies. Touching decaying corpses could be deadly, so having an instinctual fear of something that looks like human but isn't anymore, as they are dead, would make sense. Story 8. That we are living in a simulation or test environment to identify the fittest. This could all be an extremely well-crafted simulation for a job outside the simulation. In theory, heaven could just be what's outside the simulation, where bigger and better things are happening, and hell could be a place where we are sent after death to debug and cleanse our issues. What seems like a lifetime to us could just be minutes outside the simulation. Now the scary part. If whatever universe that exists outside our simulated environment is advanced enough to create a simulation, who is to say that their universe isn't simulated either? We could be in a cascading roll of simulations and never be able to prove it. So point being, just strive to be the best version of yourself. And maybe don't add to this world with children because we all know this simulation, if it were one, is completely unfair. Story 9. Vacuum death. Basically, There are two possible states for our universe, true vacuum and false vacuum. If we are in a true vacuum, it means our universe is stable and we're fine. If we are in a false vacuum, then at any moment our universe could shift state somewhere and a bubble of true vacuum would expand from that point outwards, at the speed of light, destroying everything in its path. Existence eradicated as it grows. We would be able to see it coming, but you can't avoid it, and you can't run from it. The true vacuum would destroy the entire existing universe. Story 10. Nearly every society, as it gets wealthier, stops reproducing over replacement levels. Whenever a country crosses over into first world territory, birth rates drop. There are only really two exceptions from this. Obviously, countries that have not made it yet. But we want trade partners, and poverty has been declining worldwide for decades. Source: so eventually, poverty will be gone. The other exceptions are extremely religious people, e.g., Amish, Mennonites, Mormons, ultra Orthodox Jews, conservative Muslims. No matter the wealth, they keep a growth rate of 8 and 9% above replacement, which accounts to roughly doubling their numbers every 10 years. So where is this leading us? Story 11. This is a bit boring, but it popped into my head because it was recent. Last week, the UK government tested its mobile phone emergency alert system. Everyone's phone was meant to make a siren-like sound at 3 p.m. on April 23rd. It was designed to warn of natural disasters such as floods and wildfires. But considering the current conflict in Ukraine, there was speculation on social media that the government knows something we don't, as apparently this emergency alert also notifies us if we're 20 minutes away from nuclear annihilation. In the end, it was a bit of an embarrassment as some received the alert early and some didn't receive it at all. Story 12. The idea of clones having the same consciousness. I'll go into more detail if someone wants, but imagine a machine that clones you down to the exact atom and then kills the original you. Now, some would say you died, but that clone is you now, since it has all your memories up until this point. Now consider the difference between nothing happening and being replaced with an exact clone at this exact moment. Physically speaking, there is no difference. This means that you are constantly dying and being replaced with clones. You won't live out any of your future. Your future clone will. Story 13. That there are currently civilizations carving out their chunks of the galaxy and expanding their empires. We evolved a mere 5,000 years too late and will be late to the game. Their lines in the sand will be drawn basically forever, while our species is contained to our pitiful little solar system. Never to expand to a spacefaring civilization, we will plateau and never reach our full potential. That's best case scenario. Worst case, they are brutal civilizations and just opt to sterilize every trace of us and use our planet for themselves. Story 14. That human civilization was actually propagated, and we are nothing more than a farm for a superior or more advanced species that will eventually come back to harvest us. The way ancient civilizations had documented gods, fighting in the sky by way of stone carvings and hieroglyphics, a method intended to stand the test of time, and given how civilizations of large proportions have risen and fallen, I don't know. And I almost really believe the whole multiverse theory, where when you die in one universe, you assimilate your consciousness across the others. I've had way too many experiences where I wake up to a reality slightly different than I remember. And not so much the Mandela effect. I make an effort to constantly observe my surroundings, but after you've been at a new job for 3 months and park in the same spot every day, which is facing an empty lot with a view of the highway, and suddenly one day you pull in confused to see a building, not new, slightly dilapidated, and everyone swears it has always been there. It will make you question your sanity. A minute, LOL. Story 15. The oxygenation of the atmosphere was one of the most catastrophic events for life on Earth, and led to a mass extinction event. Prior to that, anaerobic life forms dominated the Earth. Subsequent to that, the only anaerobic life that survived did so because it was able to find pockets insulated from oxygen. Later, as multicellular aerobic life forms emerged, anaerobic bacteria managed to find a hospitable environment in the digestive tracts of these new organisms. The theory is that the evolution of multicellular life was itself an adaptation that formed around anaerobic bacteria, and that in the end, we are all just shells for the bacterial colonies in our guts. We feed them every time we eat, we dispose of their waste, and in our interactions with others and the environment, we ingest more of them. Story 16. The behavioral sink described in John B. Calhoun's work. He was a mammalian specialist studying rats and mice. He did experiments on the social limits of mammals. He made a rat utopia city, providing all the necessary food and water for the population, but limited their space. They quickly developed antisocial behaviors and complete apathy for themselves and others. Even though they had as much food and water as they needed, the population would inevitably die off due to not mating. Basically exactly what is happening to the human race right now. Story 17. In Doraemon, maybe Nobita is actually just a test subject like some lab rat. Think about it, all those gadgets are for human use. but they must need testing for them to be sold for public use. But there must be harsh laws in the future, from where Doraemon comes from, that prevent such testing. That's why Doraemon and other robots are sent in the past secretly to do brutal direct testing of the gadgets to cut cost and time, and then send the data for further development. Also, that may explain why Nobita is physically and mentally so weak. Heck, those bad situations may even be staged by Doraemon himself to put up a specific gadget for testing. Story 18. Maybe not scary, but cool scary. Our consciousness is derived from quantum operations facilitated by microtubules that exist in every living organism. Neurons specialize in the processing of that data, and they have more of those structures. The quantum wave collapse, as presented in the double-slit experiment or Schrödinger cat, isn't caused by an observer, but actually creates a proto-consciousness moment when it happens. Microtubules evolved around that phenomenon and facilitated a quantum entanglement connection to a higher version of our being or consciousness that grows with us in higher dimensions that are outside of the singular time dimension. The theory is scary and beautiful at the same time because it solves a hard consciousness problem. Why some people are better at guessing than others, spiritualism, God, remote viewing, etc. We really might be quantum entangled with our ghost that will live on and exist forever. Story 19. The theory why we think things like dolls or monsters are human is creepy and scary, especially faces. I can't remember if this part ties into it, but how we can recognize faces in clouds and other objects. The theory really goes that we evolved to fear a predator that had human-like features. It goes into how some supernatural or mythical creatures once existed, like the Wendigo, depending on which version. Really, they think that the stories of the Wendigo and other creatures were warped and aren't fully like they are in the story, like how rumors are. One person tells another, and as more people hear about it and tell it, each person twists it slightly and that person interprets it slightly differently. But imagine that over a period of 10,000 plus years. Story 20. I know it's a bit of a meme at this point, but the region beta paradox. It's a bit of a damning thing. We don't want to be uncomfortable. But growing complacent in what we do is something that all of us have probably done at some point. The fact that we need something to push us over the edge to take control is something that I wish wasn't needed. But unfortunately, we don't work like that. I get uncomfortable when things are going right for me because I feel something bad is going to happen because of it. I grew complacent a bit, and it cost me my finances and a little bit of my marriage, although there were other issues there besides that, but that's not the point. The point is I've had to learn to always keep pushing, and that we can push ourselves to grow without being complacent and needing something, and in our lives to want to improve. I've learned this already, but to put into practice and accept is another step, especially with setbacks. I've grown a lot, and even though life has hit me with some major setbacks, I know I can and will recover. It just takes some time. All these other theories we have very little control over, but this one we have more control than most of us realize, and I think that's what's ultimately scary about it. Story 21. A lot of people like to believe that their loved ones are watching over them after they pass on. It's comforting to them when they need comfort, but when they don't, or they're taking care of their own, they don't really think about it. So imagine if it's true. You die, and you basically enter spectator mode, like in gaming, where you wait to respawn, but watch others, unable to participate. You can go wherever you want. So obviously you see the world, the seven wonders and all that, but you basically hang around your family. You try to offer comfort when they need it, but you see people as they are, being dirty slobs, and going to the bathroom and having sex and other stuff that you really don't want to see. Eventually you stop caring, it stops bothering you, and on you go, until you're forgotten. Some say everyone dies twice. First when the body dies, and second when the last person who remembered you thinks about you for the last time. You are never thought of again. Have I kept my father tethered to this world? I think about him every day, and it's been over 20 years. I can't say he wouldn't be proud of me because I am mostly happy, but my life hasn't turned out like he might have wanted. Still, it's my life, and I am okay with it. Story 22. The dual consciousness theory disturbed me when I read about it. Basically, in my limited layman understanding, a corpus callosotomy is a procedure that is sometimes used to treat conditions like epilepsy, where the connection between the two halves of the brain is severed. People can survive this and continue to live semi-normally, but usually with some cognitive impairments. Both halves of the brain continue to be alive, but there is little to no communication between the two sides. People who undergo the procedure can also exhibit some strange phenomena like alien hand syndrome, where the patient feels like some of their limbs will move on their own accord. They can also have difficulty controlling their non-dominant hand, trouble speaking, and issues with certain parts of their vision. The dual consciousness theory posits that both halves of the brain retain a consciousness after this procedure. Essentially, you become two people sharing the same body, completely unaware of each other. One variation of the theory is that one half of the brain is dominant, controlling most bodily functions, while the other half is basically cut off from most external stimuli, unable to communicate with the outside world for the rest of their life. Story 23. There's a theory that states we are an experiment, and that instructions and obvious flaws from our creators could be found in our DNA, almost as though something ungodly, however exceptionally advanced, made us. It's called retirement cafe. Once we reach a certain state, i.e., no war, no greedy human nature, and start to build reliable renewable energy, and a lot more sophisticated technology, such as a Type 1 civilization, we may be welcomed into a community of Type 2 civilizations. They may live on a completely different plane to us, hence why we see nothing when we look out to the stars. It would be like trying to explain our 3D world to a 2D character. Story 24, Kessler Syndrome. The idea is that as we launch more and more stuff into orbit, more and more of it will become derelict space trash. And as that space trash collides and breaks up, it becomes even more dangerous to spacecraft as it whizzes around in orbit. As we keep trying to reach space, it will keep getting more and more dangerous until we finally seal ourselves in on Earth with our own garbage. Given everything you know about humanity, this has a near 100% chance of happening. Edit. This is how Kessler Syndrome was explained to me, but it turns out that its effects would be most noticeable to satellites and space stations in low Earth orbit. And if you were simply passing through low or medium orbit, the debris in question would be considerably less dangerous, meaning space exploration would still be possible. Story 25. Aliens Theory by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Let's say intelligence is your ability to compose poetry, symphonies, do art, math, and science. Chimps can't do any of that, yet we share 99% DNA. Everything that we are, that distinguishes us from chimps, emerges from that 1% difference. Imagine a life form whose brain power is to ours, as ours is to a chimpanzee's. To such a species, our highest mental achievements would be trivial. Their toddlers, instead of learning their ABCs on Sesame Street, would learn multivariable calculus on Boolean Boulevard. Our most complex theorems, our deepest philosophies, the cherished works of our most creative artists, would be projects their school kids bring home for mom and dad to display on the refrigerator door. Scary. Story 26. Pascal's Wager. For the whole God thing is pretty interesting. Copied from here. He argued that people can choose to believe in God, or can choose to not believe in God, and that God either exists or he does not. Under these conditions, if a person believes in the Christian God, and this God actually exists, they gain infinite happiness. If a person does not believe in the Christian God and God exists, they receive infinite suffering. On the other hand, if a person believes in the Christian God and God does not exist, then they receive some finite disadvantages from a life of Christian living. And if a person does not believe in this God and God does not exist, then they receive some finite pleasure from a life lived unhindered by Christian morality. As Pascal states, let us weigh the gain and the loss in wagering that God is. Let us estimate these two chances. If you gain all. If you lose nothing. Wager then, without hesitation, that he is. I'm rolling the dice myself, but I can see someone not wanting to risk it. Story 27. I would like to think the Boltzmann brain theory is pretty scary. Essentially that due to the randomness of particles floating in space, if you had infinity to monitor them, somewhere out there would be anything you could ever imagine. A dragon, a robot, a planet, even your own brain. Statistically, you're more likely to be a brain floating somewhere out in space due to the random flow of particles, and that brain has created everything you know as life. That is more likely than the fact our planet has gone through so much, and led our evolution to produce Homo sapiens over millions of years. It's been refuted, but I love to think about things like that. It's been refuted by several people and other theories have been crafted off of it. It's interesting to think about. Story 28. Ever play Soma? What if one day in the future, you could decide to get a robotic body, free of the weakness of the flesh or whatever, and to put you in this body, they make a scan of your organic brain, and perfectly recreate it in the robotic brain. The problem is there are now two of you. At the time when the scan is finished, your organic and robotic consciousness are indistinguishable. They both believe you're the real you. They are, in fact. They, however, instantly start to divert. But what do you now do with your organic body? And is it not basically guaranteed that your current consciousness, the one behind the computer right now, is the one that stays in the organic brain? What if you were sedated before and killed right after the scan? Your robot brain would think it's you. It would be you. But would you not actually be dead? What if there is an afterlife? Would you go there and observe your robot you? And if there isn't, are you just gone? Does it matter at that point you but not you are still there? Do you want to take that risk? Story 29. Aliens in all likelihood exist, but we will never encounter them. For instance, one of the nearest planets in a habitable zone is Proxima Centauri b, which is approximately 4.2 light-years away. Let's assume this planet has life in some shape or form on it. The fastest ever manned spacecraft was Apollo 10, which reached speeds of 24791 miles per hour. It would take Apollo 10 over 100,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri b. We don't have the technology to get anywhere close to making that trip to confirm the existence of life there. Even if the trip was somehow possible, the technology needed is likely hundreds, if not thousands, of years away. However, just because we can't confirm life is out there somewhere doesn't mean it isn't. Hubble estimates there are 100 billion galaxies in the universe, each with millions or billions of stars and planets. Even if the chances of life on a planet were 1 in a trillion, in all likelihood there would be millions of planets in the universe with life on them. Long story short, space is mind-bogglingly big. Too huge for us to be alone, but too huge for us to ever confirm or deny. Story 30. I think the scariest theory is anthropocentrism, which states that humans are, in essence, the most important entity or species in the world, or even the universe. As a premise, this has been pushed for centuries by some, but it really took off in the last 200 years. Today it is referred to as gospel by heavy capitalists and many others, especially to repudiate the environmental movement. Quite simply, it is the root of all kinds of justification for the exploitation of the natural world, and to ridicule anybody who stands up for the needs of other species. In science fiction, it's often used as a justification for any action against other species in the galaxy. We haven't run into that problem yet, but it is scary as hell that people still think this way and use the concept to justify the horrors we are unleashing on Mother Nature and future generations of humans.